Everything in Stranger Things goes back to one night, Will Byers disappearing on November 6th, 1983. And in season 5, we're finally going to learn the truth. Why Will was taken, who took him, why the Upside Down is frozen in time, and who the real villain actually is. But in this video, before we get to do all of that, I would like to bring up important details everyone missed, and all the things we need to remember before we watch season 5, and allow me to theorize on what the answers to some of these questions might actually be. So let's break it down. Like this video, subscribe for more videos breaking down your favorite TV shows, and let's get right into it. In the beginning, we were led to believe that Will was taken by the Demogorgon all the way back in season 1. But now as we approach season 5, there's a lot of speculation on whether or not that's truly the case. So let's explore details around when Will was taken so we can decide who took Will and why it might have been planned. Everything about Will's abduction feels intelligent. The lights flicker before Will even leaves Mike's house. To me, this signals to us that someone or something was watching him long before he was ever taken. As he's going home and he passes the Hawkins laboratory, there is a creature in the road. Now, a lot of people have paused this moment to speculate on what this thing is. In my opinion, this shot is intentionally vague. It looks like a Demogorgon enough, but it also can look like Vecna. Looking at the longer arm and certain details, it can kind of pass for both, which I believe is intentional. As we see Will run away, whatever's chasing him is taking its time. That is a clear signature of Vecna, someone who takes his time and walks while he's chasing you. Now, as we see Will panicking in his home looking for help, this is when the infamous scene of the door unlocking itself happens. Now, I'm going to talk about why this is Vecna, not 11, and not a Demogorgon. As we know, later down the line, we see 11 do the exact same thing. When she goes to visit her mom and her aunt will not let her in, she unlocks the door telekinetically. Now, a lot of people have used this detail to assume that the original time we saw this exact move might have been 11 too. However, if you pay attention to the patterns of the writing of the Duffer Brothers and the way they have written both 1 and 11's characters, you would know that the mirroring of the way they use their powers is layered throughout the entirety of Stranger Things time and time again. When we finally get introduced to Henry and to 1 and who he is, and we see the flashbacks of him in the lab, we see him use his powers while he's still in his human form. So many parts of those scenes were one-to-ones of things we had seen 11 do before. Almost like it was hinting at a subconscious memory she had of these moments, playing into who she's been all along. She's repeating the same way exactly how he uses his powers, the moves that he does, and even the way he uses them. The door lock is no different. To me, it almost symbolizes that all the way in season 1, we were being built a character who would be a one-to-one of 11. Two characters that to me are mirrors of each other, two different sides of the same coin, and it's being played out in how they use their powers. This scene was always meant to make us believe that whoever did this was someone like Elle, someone who later down the line we would learn is number 1. And with the Duffers having known how the show was always going to end, they always knew who number 1 was going to be in the first place. Therefore, I believe this intentional mirroring of this door lock being unlocked telekinetically is to symbolize Vecna was the one who was here down the line, not that 11 had a role in Will's disappearance other than helping open the gate. And as Will then runs to the shed in his backyard, when he vanishes, the lights get extremely bright, something comes up behind him, and then he disappears. Now, to me, these are all telekinetic signatures and not Demogorgon behavior. They also mirror things we've seen throughout seasons after this that symbolize one or Vecna's powers perfectly. Another detail we can add to this is that when Hopper comes to the shed later down the line, You can hear this squelching noise while he's in there, which alludes to the fact that there was some type of portal or opening that was opened within that shed. Something that we've seen the Demogorgons do. For the Demogorgons are able to travel through different smaller portals that they open up, like the flea that's being alluded to in The Flea and the Acrobat. And we see these portals with Nancy and Jonathan when they're in the forest looking for this thing and they don't quite know what they're looking for yet. Now, until we see the big reveal, all we can do is continue to speculate. Was it a Demogorgon or was it Vecna who physically went into the real world and grabbed Will? But we do know either way, Vecna was the one behind it all. Now, before we talk about why they would have taken Will, we have to first talk about the details that allude to the fact that them taking Will from the beginning was always the plan. 11 didn't actually reopen the gate in season 1 on accident. This was all planned. In season 4, we learned that the day Will Byers disappeared was not the first day 11 or the lab had contact with the Upside Down. We learned that 2 years prior to the events of season 1, episode 1, we learned the day that Vecna was created, the same day that 11 first interacted with the Upside Down and opened the first crack in the rift, sending Henry, aka Vecna #1, into the Upside Down. This would culminate in a series of events that would lead to the disappearance of Will Byers. After the events of the lab that day, 11 enters into a coma after using her powers past her limits. This is when Dr. Brenner finds out everything that happened and decides that he will not only try to bring 11's powers back, but since she also is the only remaining child left, that they will use her powers for what they are trying to accomplish, which is mainly remote viewing and spying, and what I think would eventually be remote assassinations using telekinesis and mind control. All the things that we know of in the conspiracy theories around Project Monarch, MK Ultra, and mind control experiments in America. Reminder that we're also led to believe that Dr. Brenner does not quite understand what they are tapping into, where 11 goes when she is remote viewing these people, and what it's all connected to yet. But this is where the twist gets deeper. As they are using 11 to remote view the Soviets, something else taps into what is happening. Now, upon the first watch of season 1s and the earlier seasons, we are led to believe that this was all an accident and led to the events of them using 11 to get in contact, first contact with this creature, and that is what led to the gate that opened up the day Will Byers disappeared. However, upon a rewatch, we later see Brenner mention that the monster has been calling out to her. It wants to make contact. Go back to my theory on the different ways 11 and 1's powers are constantly mirrored. I believe we've seen this happen before. We've seen 11 all the way in season 4 use the same tactics to piggyback off Max to enter into the mind and enter into the connection that Max and Vecna had. The same mental connection that Vecna was using in season 4 to open all the gates. And this is where you have to stick with me, because according to Vecna's own words, he is now able to open gates because he took 11's power and her ability to open gates. Again, a mirror 1-to-1 of how 11 in the beginning was the one in a mental connection with a Demogorgon, and through his hijacking, he used her to open the gate, in the flip or reverse of what 11 does in season 4, where she jumps into the mental connection Vecna and Max do in order to prevent him from using those same powers to open the gate, open the door. So now that this has become clear that according to Henry's own words and the details that we've covered, that this was the plan the entire time, and not only was the plan to get in contact with 11, but that Henry had been watching her for a while, knew how her powers worked, and used her on that particular day to intentionally open a gate, the question then becomes, what else or who else was he watching, and what was he planning to do? And that's where Will comes in. So now that we've covered what took Will and how this was all a detailed plan from the beginning, this is clear now that nothing about this was an accident, including the fact that this led to the disappearance of Will. So now the question becomes, why Will? What is so special about Will, and what is Vecna using him for? Will wasn't taken at random, and this is my theory called the builder theory. Will is the builder. He's a kid who we see throughout the entirety of the earlier season who draws really good drawings entirely from memory, even worlds, who understands detail and has great memory recollection. I went back and did an entire rewatch of all the moments everyone ever went down into the Upside Down, and there was never a moment we saw someone go in the Upside Down before Will entered it, right? The only person we've ever seen enter earlier than Will was One himself. And when One enters the Upside Down, it's clearly an unterrained world, like he calls himself an explorer. So how did we get from the Upside Down we saw with One to the Upside Down we now have? After Will is taken, suddenly the Upside Down becomes a perfect one-to-one copy of Hawkins, down to the exact rooms, lights, layout, and it's finished far more in season 4 than the pieces we see in Will's flashbacks and even in the season 5 preview. We also know that when we are witnessing Vecna in his own mindscape, his own version of Hawkins and his home is fractal and incomplete. It's a bunch of floating pieces everywhere. This leads me to believe that he himself cannot build whole environments. He rearranges memories, but he doesn't create originals. So if Vecna needed a blueprint, Will's mind was the blueprint. Will's imagination is the only thing we've ever seen in the show that can recreate everything he's seen. Again, my theory on the mirrors of people's powers, Will has something similar. We've seen him be used in earlier seasons to recreate the things that are happening in the Upside Down, drawing it from memory and even being connected to the demodogs and the dust at one point and drawing exactly what they were doing, leading to the tunnel underground map that we see. But to me, what even adds more, there's the slug. The demodog that grew from Will's body, the one he coughed up at the end of season 1 that leads to the demodog in the real world in season 2. So was Will not only creating the dimension, but he also was helping create all the new monsters we get after that season. Just like in D&D, Will the Wise, just like a dungeon master creating creatures, Vecna needed Will to create the Upside Down we know today. And now this connects directly, in my opinion, to why the Upside Down is frozen in time. Now, when we see the older party enter the Upside Down in season 4, they realize everything is stuck in 1983. Actually, the exact date that Will was taken, November 6th. But we now know the dimension originally looked nothing like Hawkins. The sky was yellow, not red. It was unshaped wild terrain, and the particles existed, but nothing else had form. So why did it freeze on that exact date in that exact time? Because Will was the anchor. Vecna uses people's minds, memories, and trauma to shape the world around him. He even says it himself, the more memories I take, the stronger I become. He needed Hawkins recreated, and Will's mind was the perfect template. So the moment Will entered that dimension, the Upside Down copied him, and it froze. That is why we have the frozen Upside Down, the one that stuck in November 6, 1983, the day Will disappeared. It's because he needed Will to create the dimension off of his memories, and his memories would have ended on that date of Hawkins. Now here is where everything shifts. Based off of all the lore we get all the way up to season 4, the backstory of Henry Creel, Vecna, and One, but also adding in the first Shadow stage play, which gives us Henry Creel's true childhood, and it rewrites the entire origin story. The question then becomes, who is the real big bad of the show? Now, based off of loosely describing the first Shadow, Henry showed powers earlier than we thought. Henry had contact with something before he even entered the dimension, and Henry was being influenced, maybe even manipulated, long before he became Vecna. And I believe that this all ties into Brenner's line to 11, "One day you will see the truth." The truth isn't about her, it's about him. Vecna's monologue in season 4 sounds like an origin story, but the key lines expose a twist. He found the dust, he didn't create it. He shaped the mind flayer, but he didn't quite invent it. Something was already there, something older, something that made Henry believe that he could transcend. We also get the mentions from Dustin that Vecna is the general, not the king. Something is potentially controlling him. And when Murray burned the demo creatures in Russia, it affected everything. The particles are the hive mind. And if Henry is connected to these particles, to the shadow, then the hive mind controls Henry too. We also learn in the first shadow that Henry's powers might even come from the particles, his original powers before he even entered the upside down. So with all this being said, I could do a separate video breaking down the actual plot of the first shadow, but it sounds like although we're led to believe that Vecna is the true big bad, he truly is not, and that might be the big reveal of season 5. And now for the biggest question of it all. How does it end? Now, the showrunners confirm season 5 will be dark and emotional. Not that season 4 wasn't already dark and emotional, right? So the biggest theory for me is not only how might it end, but who might die. Possible deaths would be Steve. He'd be the heroic sacrifice arc, and I believe he's been set up a couple times already to have that arc. The writers themselves even admitted that in season 1, Steve was already supposed to have died, but they were able to keep the character, which was great because he became one of the best characters in the show, but that does not mean that they still have that ending for him, right? So again, it's most likely Steve. Now, another death that could be possible is Max. I believe we've been set up for the fact that there is a moral argument for bringing someone back to life. I believe that there's a foreshadow of this at the end of season 4, where 11 brought her back a minute after she died. Is she even really truly still alive? And what is the morality behind saving someone after death and 11 using her powers in that way? That is something that can definitely be explored and end up in Max not coming back to life. Now, the next possible death, in my opinion, will be 11, because we've been set up from the beginning that this Byler Destiny swap theory where Will lives and Elle has to die in order for things to return to the way that they're supposed to be. I know that a lot of people feel different types of ways about the Byler arc, and I do and don't in both ways kind of see how it has been set up. But either way, there is a mirror between Will and Elle, and a destiny swap, if you will, of when Will was taken, Elle came to the real world. And all the times Will was connected to the upside down, Elle was the one who was free. If you go further, Elle becoming the girlfriend of Mike, while Will has a crush on Mike and he's in love with Mike, right? And he's the friend who's always been there, who's now been replaced by Elle. Even to the fact where Elle becomes literally a family member of Will, she becomes a part of his family for a significant amount of the show. So there's a lot of weird destiny swapping happening here between 11 and Will that, in my opinion, in order to make it right, Elle might be the one who falls. And now to wrap this video up with my biggest theory, the biggest death, and how it all might end, is I believe we're being set up for a Henry redemption arc. I believe Henry wakes up, not Vecna, Henry, meaning that the real endgame isn't killing the monster, it's freeing the boy who's trapped beneath it. I believe it ends with them connecting back into the consciousness of Henry Creel, not Vecna. And when Henry Creel finds out what he's done and that he's the only one who can stop himself and stop the darkness within himself, that will be the end of the show. But season 5 isn't just the end, it's the reveal. Why Will was chosen, who was really in control, and what the upside down truly is. And it all goes back to the moment it began. Will Byers, November 6, 1983. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Subscribe for more breakdowns, and I'll see you in the next one.